Thank you for coming.
What a pleasure.
Thank you for coming. For me, this is literally a table, and it's like bringing my friends. I feel like we haven't had that many interactions, but we met at a farmer's market that I sell coffee at. And for me, meeting you at the farmer's market was a full circle moment because I went to University of Rochester, CUNY, and then the University of Rochester, and I studied marketing, business administration with a concentration in marketing. And I read your books in college.
Yeah.
And then one day I'm at the farmer's market, and it just came full circle.
Well, it came full circle for me too, because when you write a book, you're putting it into the world. You have no idea where it's going to land. So to meet someone who's doing great work like you are, what a treat.
Thank you. Man, a big thing about you is change, right? And I feel like the world is changing very fast, and COVID, I feel like accelerated a lot of things. And something that blew my mind about you is that you came up with the concept of email marketing. And you've done a lot of other great things that I would like for you to get into. But what would you say led up to that? Like, how do you come up with that concept? Did you feel like that's what was missing? Like, would you just email people and it's like, maybe I would want more information about you then?
Okay, so I got my first email address in 1976, long before you were born. And I was building software for online services like CompuServe and Prodigy and things like that. What I do for a living is a few things, but one of them is I see a system and I try to understand what's making that system work and how would that system work better. And what became clear at Prodigy and CompuServe and some of the other online services is that what was scarce was attention. And that was the first time that was really a factor, because before that, what was scarce was TV channels. There were only 3. So if you had a slot on a TV channel, you did great. But on the internet, there's 1 billion channels. So there's no scarcity of channels. What's scarce is attention. So I started thinking about, well, if I could find a way to create or securitize or produce attention and serve the people who were offering me their attention and serve the people who wanted attention, we could make value happen. And so I built a company called Yoyodyne, which was one of the first internet companies. And our mechanism was email marketing, and no one had ever done it before us. Not spam, but the good kind. Our emails got an 88% open rate and a 38% response rate.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. Yeah. On Shopify, my average is like 4 or 5% right now.
And that's doing great. 4 or 5% is great. But in those days, it was a miracle.
Wow. Right now, you've seen my brand. Interesting enough, at the farmer's market, we have the only branded tent. And, I spent like my last $1,000 on that back in that time. And for me, it was just like, I want people to understand that we're different. I want you to associate with our story, or at least like connect with it. I built the brand because I saw something missing in the market, and that was people trying Dominican coffee. Because I was born in the countryside of the Dominican Republic, and I just felt like we just didn't have that here. You know what I mean? And I know it's great coffee. For some reason, I knew that as a child, and they gave me coffee. But I would also go to the fields and have that type of experience growing up. And we're living in a world where, like you said, attention is what people are looking for. But when it comes to people who listen to this podcast, like small business owners and people trying to get their thing off the ground, what would you say is the number one thing right now? Like Purple Cow, how do you stick out in a market that there's so many people in the modern day trying to do things? Sure. We have the internet. It's just people with millions of followers, so many influencers, so many paid campaigns. It's just people selling you stuff every single day. You can't watch anything on YouTube if you don't, without getting an ad, if you're not premium anymore.
Yeah.
So how do you stick out as a small business?
I think the words matter. I don't think it's true that you're the only brand at the farmer's market. And I don't think it's useful to say, I've seen your brand. What I've seen is your logo. A logo is not a brand. You are one of the only tents with a logo on it. But I experienced your brand long before I recognized your logo. Your brand is your energy. Your brand is the possibility and the connection and the magic and the potential that you show up with. And you live that. A brand is a promise. It's what should we expect from you the next time we see you. A logo could be anything, right? Yeah. So if I said to you, think of 3 brands you really admire, that logos that you think are really well done. Well, people usually say logos like Nike's logo, whatever.
Right.
And I say, how many of the three you picked make a product that you could be proud of? And the answer is always yes. Because what we do is we associate the product, the voice, the energy with the logo. We don't pick a logo that was well designed that's associated with something crappy, because logos don't matter. Brands matter. Mm-hmm. And you chose a brand in a world where, in New York, there is no coffee shortage. You cannot go more than 50 feet without being able to get some coffee.
Right.
So how are you going to avoid being the cheapest commodity provider? Well, you have a brand. It's, what do I expect from this cup of coffee? What does it remind me of? So that if someone gets into the habit of drinking your Dominican coffee, in a blind taste test, they might not think it tastes better. But we're not blind. So therefore, we do think it tastes better because we know what we're drinking. Mm-hmm. And that act of creating a story, you're really good at that. And a lot of people are afraid to do it.
What would you say? Where would you say people can start for that? Because I feel like I've seen so many brands just come and go, so many products come and go, and I feel like the pandemic was like the true test. It was like the major test. Like, are you up on your e-commerce game? Are you up on your storytelling? Are you making content to tell your own story? You know what I mean? I see so many business owners that have a hard time making content. I'm like, oh, you already have the tool you need. It's an iPhone. You know what I mean? It's like telling that story. And I feel like so many people have a hard time telling a genuine story or creating a product that doesn't tie back to them.
Yeah. So the simple question is, who would miss you if you didn't show up? And I know that on every other Saturday, if you weren't at the market, I would miss you, even though, as you and I were talking, because I roast my own beans, I'm not a really good customer of yours. But people would miss you. They would miss your energy. They would miss your presence. They would miss what you sell. Most, quote, brands that struggle, we wouldn't miss them if they were gone, right? That there's a bodega a block from here, and if that bodega got replaced by another bodega, very few people would notice. Yeah. Because it's average stuff for average people. But if you are specific, if you identify the smallest viable audience and delight them, they will tell the others. Mm-hmm. That's hard because we've been pushed and indoctrinated to be average. And you don't want to do that. You want to be for someone, not try to be for everyone.
Wow. Yeah. It's very challenging sometimes being so unique because you almost have to make the argument every time. At the farmer's market 2 weeks ago, somebody came up to me and they said, oh, you sell coffee? What's your deal? Tell me your spiel. And I was like, well, honestly, I don't kind of have a spiel, but sure. Like, my name is Hector, blah, 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 blah. This is what we do. This is how we do it. If you think that's cool, then maybe you could join my tribe, And we'll lead right into the tribe thing. And that's why I feel like that was one of the first books I read about you too. Tribes, building your community and growing with it. It really blew my mind that in New York City, we have about 1.5 million Dominicans and we don't have a coffee brand to identify with. But outside of that, I also feel like there's millions of people that have never tried this product too. Yep. Looking for stories online, people sometimes want to go back there in a sip, Where could people start when building their tribe? What does that look like for people?
Well, I would say the first thing is you probably can't build a tribe. You might be able to find an existing tribe that needs someone to lead them. Those are different things. Wow. And so when you find people, the way Apple did, who live in airports, work in digital media, want to do things that are beautiful, that show good taste, Apple showed up to lead them. And some people now identify with Apple, but the tribe was there before. Fast Company magazine, where I wrote more words than almost anybody, the people they showed up to write for, publish for, they existed before Fast Company got there. They just needed to be connected. And, one of the things that you learned with that guy who wanted to hear your pitches, a good answer might be, this might not be for you. I hear it might not be for you. If you're the kind of person that's looking for a different coffee experience that might be richer, more delicious, more grounded, whatever it is, then you might be interested in this. But if it's not, I'm not going to chase you down the street, because if I chase you down the street, it's not going to work anyway. Right.
And it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And somebody will probably call the cops. It would be pretty interesting in terms of that. I have so many thoughts because you have accomplished so many great things. Yeah. And the time right now with AI. I saw you talking about that, and you write a blog every day, and you post it, and that's like pretty remarkable because I feel like we're living in a time where that's hard for a lot of people. I feel like you said you committed to that about 20 years ago, more or less. Yeah,
it's been 9,000 posts.
9,000 posts. Yeah. Wow, people don't even post on social media that much, and that's easy. How did you get into that discipline? Would you say?
Well, the good news about having a discipline is I only needed to decide once. If I didn't do that, then I'd have to have a debate with myself every day. Is this one good enough? There's going to be a post tomorrow. And the reason there's going to be a post tomorrow is not because it's my best post, but because it's tomorrow. And once we have that commitment, the same way we commit to having lunch every day, then the only question is, what should I have for lunch? Not, should I have lunch? So I view this as a privilege. I don't sell ads on my blog. I don't generally sell stuff on my blog. If people are eager to loan me their earballs and their eyes for a couple minutes, I'd like to repay that. And even if no one read my blog, I would still write it. It makes me better. It makes me think more clearly. And it has paid enormous dividends. And I've said it many times before. Everyone should have a blog, even if you don't use your real name, even if no one reads it, just because writing every single day makes you more honest.
Wow. In terms of writing content, I feel like sometimes I have a hard time writing. I feel like growing up in the time I grew up in, it's been very digital for me. I grew up in that whole Instagram, Facebook time, and all these social networks. Like I'm one with that, because that was my time.
Sure.
For me in high school was like, how do I look cool on this platform, right?
You're so cool.
I try. Now it's more like, how can I tell you my story and help you try this coffee, right? What would you say is the modern climate on AI, right? I saw you mention something about mediocre work and stuff like that, right? But I feel like AI is only getting better. And even for video editing, for captions on your actual footage and algorithms and just helping you write an Instagram caption or a blog. How would you say that can help and hinder people right now? Because I feel like some people are abusing it. Some people are using it to their advantage in a safe and healthy way.
Okay, so I don't do any consulting on purpose, but one of the challenges that someone who sells stuff has when it comes to creating content is I create content because I'm a teacher. You're creating content because you're a coffee roaster. Those are different things, right? So what is the place you're taking us? Where would you like to educate us to go? Are you trying to get the people who already drink your coffee to drink more of it? Because that could lead to a very wired situation. Are you trying to get the people who drink it to tell other people? Why would they tell other people? It's really awkward to walk up to someone you sort of know and say, have you tried switching to this coffee? It's much better. People aren't going to do that. So where's the mission? If we look at a company like Patagonia, Patagonia has no trouble coming up with content because Patagonia's mission is very simple and very broad, which is how can we get a certain group of people to realize we don't get a second chance at the environment, and how do we narrate a change around our environment and our culture? So they got a backlog of 500 things to write about. Whereas if your story is, please buy my coffee, I'm working really hard, you don't have a lot of different ways to say that. And the problem with Instagram and Facebook is you're working for free to help them. They're not working for free to help you. And so their algorithms push you to do a certain sort of entertainment that gets people to use Instagram or Facebook a little bit more. That's not your project. Your project is to lead a group of people. I'm just going to say you have 10,000 customers. Your 10,000 customers, if they each got one more person to join this group, this tribe, this journey, you'd have your numbers made for years, right?
Right.
Why would someone tell someone else about that? They're only going to do it because of affiliation or status, not because your coffee in a blind taste test is more delicious. So how do you invent that story? Once you lean into that, you're doing something an AI could never figure out. You're doing something that will make the next 50 things you post much easier to do. But right now, if you're, and I haven't seen your stuff, so I'm not criticizing you, but if you're just chasing what other people are doing to get attention online, people can tell.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because people are always like, "You ever heard of this brand?" Or "You see what these people are doing, and maybe you should try this." And I'm always like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah," but I'm just kind of dismissing it because I understand I have to keep up with industry trends and certain things that you just have to keep up with. But for the most part, I like to ignore everything that's going on because I don't want it to affect my creative process and kind of what I put out, because we have an identity and this is what I've created and this is the message that we're pushing and this is our people and the mission, and I like it how it is. It's worked so far. I don't think we need to change anything, and I don't even like doing sales. You know what I mean? I feel like the thing sells itself because people are like, well, we heard about you and we identify with this thing and we would love to buy your coffee because XYZ. You know what I mean? And that's my approach to things. I like the organic way of things where people identify with what we do, opposed to us to being like, yeah, we're going to match that price and don't worry, we'll do this and we'll do that. I feel like that's my type of approach towards that.
So let me tell you the story of Tom's shoes, because this is, I think, totally relevant. Do you know what the shoes I'm talking about? Okay. So
buy one, they'll gift one, right?
Yeah, my friend Blake started it.
Oh, wow.
His name's not Tom. And the idea at the beginning was, if you buy a pair of these $80 espadrilles made in an ethical factory in Portugal, Blake will give an identical pair to a kid who's never had a pair of shoes. And who bought the first 10,000 pair? First 10,000 pair were bought by a certain group of people, almost all of them women, almost all of them in their late 20s, who could afford more expensive shoes, and all of whom already had shoes. And why would they buy these shoes? They had a logo on the back, a big logo. They were the first nice shoes that had a logo on them. Why would you do that? You would do it so that when your friends saw you, they would say, because they have a social obligation to say, nice shoes. And then you would say, I'm paraphrasing here, well, I'm better than you because these shoes are philanthropic shoes. By buying these shoes, I got a pair of shoes for a kid who's never worn a pair of shoes before. So your status would go up. You had a story to tell other people. Your friend now is in an awkward situation because if they don't buy a pair of these, they're a bad person.
Right.
If they do buy a pair of these, they get to affiliate with you and be back in the circle. And so it spread and it spread and it spread and it spread. Notice none of it had to do with they fit really well. You have to fit well enough, but that's not what the story is. Okay. So he grows it to a business with more than $500 million. And then what do you do? Well, then he came out with coffee. And the coffee failed. And the reason the coffee failed is that no one looks at your cup of coffee and says, oh, did you get new coffee? And so there's no opportunity for a conversation. Add to that the fact that you can't say, and because I got this, a kid who's never had a cup of coffee is now drinking the same coffee. It's a totally different story. So he meant well, but the engine of the growth was a different sort of engine. And so the opportunity and the challenge is you make a slightly better than average commodity. Coffee at some level is coffee, just like a cola at some level is a cola. You can say it tastes a little bit better, but it's still coffee. So what you're really selling is the story around it, the story of you and the story of how you came to be doing this, the story of where you grew up, the story of who grew it, the story of what kind of people drink it. There are all these stories available to you. Mm-hmm. And you need to find a story for some of your lines of coffee that people will eagerly bring up in conversation so that it will spread. So if I was going to brainstorm with you right this second, one thing that I can imagine, what's your most expensive coffee?
It's a limited edition coffee. I was in Puerto Rico about a month ago. Went to this local farm, bought 40 pounds, checked it, brought it back. It's $32 a bag.
$32 for how many pounds?
12 ounces.
12 ounces. What if it was $62 for 12 ounces? What would the story need to be that would make me, on a special occasion, buy that? And if I served somebody that coffee, do you think I would mention it to them?
Absolutely.
Right? So I've seen that coffee that comes out of cat poop.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not interested in that.
Me neither.
But there's a good story there.
Yeah.
I could imagine serving that to
somebody. It's like $300 a pound.
Yeah.
So they're definitely making a statement.
Right. The more it costs, the better it is, because the story includes the price and the price includes the story. Because, again, we don't have a coffee shortage. So or my friend Sean Askinosie, who is a brilliant, heroic chocolate maker, one of the first bean-to-bar chocolate makers in the world. And Sean pays his farmers 5 times the going rate, puts their kids through private school, visits them once a year in the Philippines, Tanzania, brings underprivileged kids from Missouri with him. It's on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And when you buy one of his bars and the picture of the farmer is on the wrapper, you're going to share a piece of chocolate and you're going to tell them a story. And, the packaging mistake he makes, he doesn't go far enough in this direction, because it's the opposite of Nestle's. It's the opposite of Hershey's. Well, what are you the opposite of? And how do you turn that dial to become even more the opposite of whatever it is you're the opposite
Mm-hmm. of? You're cooking up my brain, because that's something me and my friend Nelly always talk about, in terms of being different in terms of what we do, because for us it's really big on representing our people, and representing outside of the island, and just kind of exposing the world to what we do, and the great work that's out there. Because like you said, there's no coffee shortage. I don't think we need any more coffee shops in New York City, but for some reason they just keep on popping up. And the pandemic did some cleansing, but then it just doubled it right after, and here we are. People just bought the shops that closed and then just put a new brand on it, a new logo on top of it, right? Yeah. And it's all coffee, probably from the same warehouse. What would you say in terms of digital marketing tactics, is what it is right now? What is the climate? Because there's just such an abundance of things. We have so many social networks. There's always email marketing. There's still billboards on the highway. There's still TV going. Now there's YouTube. You know what I mean? You listen to podcasts. Now there's ads on podcasts. Like, what do you think is the climate of digital marketing nowadays, and even physical, right? Where is that going, in your opinion, right now?
All right, so the essence of permission marketing is you can't buy it. You have to earn it. Who would miss you if you were gone? If I didn't send my blog out tomorrow, how many people would notice? That's the opposite of hitting the boost button on Facebook and sending Mark $100, right? That when you buy Google ads, you need to understand they auction them off. And if you win the auction, you overpaid, because everyone else thought it was worth a little less than you. And so there are lots of ways to hustle to buy attention. But the opportunity is to work hard to earn permission. Anticipated, personal, and relevant messages that people want to get. That's slower, and it's not as sexy, but it works and it sticks around. And, I spent a few years ago $750,000 on Facebook ads and made $7. I broke even, but $7 basically. Because as soon as something starts working, Facebook changes the price so that they can sell it to somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't want to be Facebook's provider. I don't want to be their customer. And I don't want to work for them for free. I want to earn the attention I get and help my customers, not help the middleman.
That makes me feel really good, because that is my approach. I feel like in terms of being different in what I do, it's me educating people. I feel like 90+% of coffee roasters are just like, buy my coffee. It's fresh and this and that. And people don't know about degassing in coffee and things like that. Right. And it's like a lot of brands, you mentioned it in one of your books. It's like kind of like false advertising basically, right? And using these buzzwords to just get you and your money. But it's like, the freshest coffee you're ever going to have. Like, we roasted today, you have it tomorrow. Well, it needs to degas for 10 to 14 days. You ever heard about that? No, I just heard it's the freshest cup of coffee. You know what I mean? Right. Maybe you don't want the freshest cup of coffee because it's chemically changing within the 2 week period.
But if you believe it's better, it is better if you can't tell the difference. And, when they did the test between Coke and Pepsi, Coke was dominant. And John Scully figured out that in a blind taste test, Pepsi tastes better. And that only works if people put on a blindfold before they drink their coffee or their Coke. Because what happened was, in a not blind taste test, everyone insisted Coke tasted better.
Right.
So given that we live in this world where it's not a blind taste test, what are you teaching people so that they feel like they earned the deliciousness in this cup of coffee? Earning it comes from the story, and the more you charge for it, the more the story has to make up the difference.
Yeah, there are some coffees that are like ridiculous prices, and sometimes I'm just blown away. I'm talking about like $2,500 to $3,000, like a kilo, a pound, like grams.
Yeah, that's coffee for idiots. And the fact is that it's okay if you can afford it to drink coffee for idiots. Where it falls apart is when someone realizes they're an idiot. And some of the richest people in the world own luxury brands. Hermes, Louis Vuitton. Tell me a Birkin bag is worth $28,000. Like, what is it about the bag that's worth $28,000? All it is a story, right? You get a $300 backpack and a $27,000 story. And the $27,000 story is it makes your friends feel poor. And that's fine. If that's important to you, it's a bargain for $27,000 because you didn't have to buy a private jet or anything. And so what story are we telling that helps people become who they seek to become? If you want to be a luxury brand, go be a luxury brand, but your story better hold up.
Wow. That's very real. Something I'm super curious about is you roasting coffee at home. Like, that's like the most mind-blowing thing that I've learned about you today. And I just need you to get into that, because how do you get into this? And then, what was your educational journey like? What was the experimenting? Because coffee roasting, there's so many things that go into that. And I've been doing it for like 5+ years, and I'm still learning to this day. Oh, yeah.
First of all, I didn't say I was good at it. That's important. I don't want to pretend this is something you can learn on your own and be good at it. Yeah. The guy who started one of the big social networks, whose name I just forgot, the one that doesn't matter. He used to live down the street from me. And I called up Marco, and Marco's into coffee. He blogs about coffee all the time. And I said, I got this fancy coffee machine, and it's not yielding what I wanted to. Come on over. And we pulled 20 or 30 shots, and it just wasn't working. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, where are you getting your coffee? And I said, buy that. He said, you don't roast your own? And I said, no. He said, then I won't help you. And he left, because he said that was the key to the whole thing. So I was like, all right, Marco knows better than me. I don't even drink coffee. Mm-hmm. So I looked online, and there's a company that sells a Korean coffee roaster for $350. And I figured it'll pay for itself in 20 pounds. So I bought it. And it's basically a glass tennis ball can that rotates and has hot air blowing through it. Mm-hmm. He uses his outside, so it has a big extension cord. And when he's roasting, he goes outside and he brings it in. I installed it in my lunch room. So there's an algorithm that heats it up and cools it down. And then there's 2 settings, maximum temperature and the length. And I made a little notebook, and I started correcting each number. But you can do the math. There's a million different combinations of those 2 numbers. I haven't made 1,000,000 pounds, so I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah.
But what I do know is if someone isn't buying their coffee from you, if they're buying their coffee from a well-known brand at the supermarket, it's not 3 days old, and it hasn't done its gassing for 10 days. It's 3 months old, 7 months old, 2 years old. And no one would buy bread that way. So why are you buying coffee that way?
Right.
And if I had met you first, I would just be a regular customer of yours. But instead I did this, and my fans seem to like it. So, yeah. And it gives me pleasure to go down to the basement every few weeks, turn a couple dials, and something magic happens. I like that feeling of something magic happening.
Yeah. Coffee roasting is very fun. It's very scientifical. One thing I've learned is coffee changes every year. You know what I mean? Because you could try to
wild product. Yeah.
Yep. And it gets affected by rain, climate, the amount of shade, if there's more sun or not, if it's cloudy or not. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. For me, it's chocolate, because I can't handle coffee. My body doesn't agree with it.
When did you stop drinking coffee?
25 years ago.
Wow. I'm 27.
There you go. It's your fault. But when Bean to Bar chocolate came along, I knew John Scharfenberger, who was first. I know Sean Askinozzi. I came very close to starting a chocolate company, like one day away. I can tell what country a chocolate bean is from. A chocolate bar is from just by tasting it. I can tell the difference between Peru and Madagascar. I understand just how oppressed the farmers in Ghana and the Ivory Coast are. I understand about conking. I have a mélangeur in my basement that I sometimes take nibs, and I just love everything about it. So I could see how all of that is applicable to coffee. The difference is I can eat chocolate, and so I do.
Have you ever tried to roast cacao?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The winnowing is a real pain in the ass.
The what?
When you get so the way you make chocolate is chocolate's a fruit. It's not a bean. And the fruit is this thing that's looks like a small loaf of bread. They take it off the tree and they let it rot. And that rotting, that fermenting, puts something into the beans. So then you get the beans, and then roasting them isn't particularly difficult. However, after you roast them, you got to take off the shells. That's called winnowing. And taking off the shells, it's horrible. There's just no good way to take off the shells. There are these machines that blow air, and the light ones go up to the sky, and it's just horrible. I did that once. I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. Man, you spoke about farmers, and that's something I pride myself on, and like working directly with the farmers. And it's really hard trying to work directly with farmers as a small player, because you just need a certain level of capital to build relationships, because a direct relationship comes with you affording a container of coffee and, boatload and all these things happening and stuff like that. What would you say is a way for brands to make a more genuine and sustainable story? You know what I mean? Like we were saying earlier, people just love to use buzzwords nowadays, but it's like, are you really sticking to that? Like if we really sat down and audited everything you said, would it really check out?
Right.
How would you say brands can really connect more with people like cacao farmers and coffee farmers and actually make impact? Because I feel like people throw the word around, but are they really enacting change? And what does change look like for a lot of us moving forward in these industries?
Yeah. Well, I spent 1.5 years as a volunteer organizing the Carbon Almanac. So the 1,900 of us in 90 countries created a 97,000-word fact-checked, illustrated, footnoted guide to what's happening in the climate. So unfortunately, I know a lot about it. And there are people who will tell you they're doing their best, they're making a difference, and they're putting their plastic bottles in the recycling bin. And when you say to them, did you know that all the plastic recycling in New York gets burned and none of it gets recycled? Did you know that plastic recycling was invented by the plastics industry, and most plastic, no matter how hard you try, could never be recycled? They're like, oh. And then they'll recycle their bottles again tomorrow, because the story we tell ourselves drives our behavior. And from a climate point of view, we're really in a jam. The world is never going to be the same again. And one person changing their behavior a little bit will make no difference whatsoever. We need to make systemic change happen. And the same thing is true for how do we support the hardworking people who grow coffee and chocolate, two of the poorest groups of people in the world. $3 a day is what many of them make in a living. And the answer is not one person buying your coffee instead. It's systemic change. It's figuring out how to make it so that the restaurant we buy from or the high school cafeteria serves your coffee instead of the cheaper one that they can buy. That if we can turn a dial on systemic change, one system at a time, we know the system changes. And we've seen brands like Patagonia show up, and they have a very successful recycled clothing business. Any MBA would tell them that's a bad idea, because every time they sell you a recycled vest, they're not selling a new vest. But that's okay, because that's not their mission. That's not their story. And so figuring out how to make systemic change happen, it happens when you insist from the people who are selling you something on a higher standard. It's when your customers insist on a higher standard from you. It's when I talk about your coffee, maybe what I talk about is on the bag is a picture of a farmer who made twice as much money last year because of you. Now I am part of the reason that farmer is making twice as much money, and on and on and on. We need to change systems if we want things to get better.
Yeah, it's really tough as a small brand, but I feel like I've always had the same vision and mission, and I've just been drilling it as much as possible, and just trying to scale the idea because it's really how you create the change, right? And I feel like across the world, that's, like you said, in the coffee industry and other industries, it's really tough. And the worst part is that they are the ones who make the least amount of money in the entire supply chain. And without that, we can't have this, and to me that just blows my mind. And it's like, why wouldn't you take care of the base of the foundation of this entire industry? And there's so much.
But that's because we're human. I mean, the clothes that we're wearing were made by people who make just as much money as these farmers, but the story doesn't involve that. So as marketers, the tool we have is storytelling, not guilting people, not shaming people, but helping them tell a story, right? I'm too smart to eat meat. That's a story. That's not you're a bad person, you're killing your grandchildren. It's you're too smart to get fooled. That it raises your status to not have a hamburger because only stupid people eat hamburgers.
That reminds me of a term that I learned one time, and it was called ethical consumerism. And I was just blown away by that. I was like, oh, that's never heard of that before. Very interesting. Can we really impact change as consumers, right? When we align with these brands and things like that, because it's like if we can't scale it, it's like recycling a bottle. If it's just you and then it doesn't even do what it should be doing, that you understand is going to do something, how can we really enact change as individual people, I would say?
Right. Well, my argument is we cannot enact change as individual people until we come together. When we come together, we have an enormous amount at a typical company, and I've worked at big companies, at a typical company, if 50 customers call in and complain about something, that's an enormous amount. That gets the CEO's attention, 50 phone calls. So if you organize and 1,500 people call and call and call and call, the company's going to change. They don't even know what to do if 1,500 people call. And we forget to do that because we've been indoctrinated into thinking that we're all individuals and that our community action doesn't matter. But if you have ever driven past a school that had a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit and that little picture of the kid crossing, and someone drives through it 60 miles an hour, it's none of your business to tell me what the speed limit is. We shame that, but that's not okay. No, we've all agreed we don't want to run kids over. The speed limit here is 15 miles an hour.
Right.
Well, we can do the same thing with lots of other things. We've all agreed we're not going to have cheap chocolate at Halloween. Don't do that. Do it as a community. Stand for something. Spread the word.
One thing I'm really passionate about is building a really solid team. I feel like for me, I've gotten to the point where it's really hard to run the show now by myself. It's a lot of moving parts. And we're living in a different world right now. Like I'm really grateful you came here in person today and have this real human experience because I feel like the world has gone more remote. We're getting a lot of our time back and we're going to a more sustainable way, I would say, in terms of time, because time is the only resource we can't get back. And one of the main things that I've been trying to figure out since COVID is how do I build a team? Right. A team that actually stays, a team that actually is passionate about what we do, and that wants to help us create the change and all the things that we want to enact in the world. But what would you say is your approach to team building post-COVID, or what would you recommend companies nowadays? Because I feel like retention is not what it used to be.
Retention isn't what it used to be because a lot of bosses lied to people and they said, this is a mission. They said, this is the best job you're ever going to have. And then they ended up just getting a list of chores. And that the minute things didn't go well, they were disposable. And my new book, The Song of Significance, is all about this. People want significance at work. That's the thing they want the most of. So from a practical point of view, it seems to me that it is easier to outsource than ever before. You didn't make the cameras that Nestor's using to film this, and you didn't make the microphone. In fact, there's all these things where you don't need somebody on your team doing that thing. Mm-hmm. So any job that can be outsourced maybe should be. And that leaves you with people who are doing work where you can't write down all the steps, who are doing work where they have to use their best judgment, who are doing work that is significant. And if there's not that many of those people, and you trust them, you give them agency, people will find significance and people stay where they grow. And the mistake we make is we're trying to emulate the 30,000 people who work at Starbucks or the 100,000 people who work at Amazon. It's not a race to say how big can you be. It's a race to say what's the smallest useful team of people that can do work that scares them in a consistent and persistent way. Mm-hmm. When you create that opportunity, turnover isn't really a big problem.
That's so interesting. life is so different nowadays. You know, it takes conversations like this to take me back. And like I said, I'm 27, and I feel like the stuff I've seen, you know, between middle school, high school, college, and now, it's the world has gotten a lot of spins.
The world has changed more than it has ever had before, and this is as calm as it's ever going to be again. So buckle up.
I'm gonna work on that. Oh man. Something I like to talk about is culture, right? I feel like there's a balance of culture, ethnicity, and things like that nowadays, and people like to tie culture, ethnicity, origins to brands, products, and things like that, right? What would you say is a way people can marry that? Because I feel like a lot of people do that sometimes, and it just seems like you're just selling the culture, or you're just like, you should buy this because I'm this person. You know what I mean? And my thing is like, is it really a good product? Or like, I feel like a lot of people sometimes have really good stories, and then you get to the product and it's like, well, I'm never gonna buy this again. You know what I mean?
Well, okay, so you're conflating two different things. The first one is, what is the worldview of the person you're trying to tell a story to?
Mm-hmm.
When they wake up in the morning, what do they see? What do they believe? What do they yearn for? So there are plenty of people who want nothing to do with any of their products or services in their life being associated with anything that has to do with identity
Right.
or culture. There are other people who wake up in the morning whose worldview is, if I'm not buying my values and showing my values, I feel empty.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a service to be able to offer that person a story about culture. And then the second part is, again, I just need to repeat how easy it is for us to fool ourselves. If you ask someone, which do you prefer, Beck's Light or St. Pauli Girl beer, most people who drink beer will have an opinion. It's exactly the same fluid from the same assembly line in the same factory in two different bottles.
Mm-hmm.
That if you offer somebody a glass of water, they say, no, I want bottled water. The bottled water came from the tap. It's exactly the same fluid. We do this over and over again with things we need, with things we want, with things we dream of. Why do we need cars where the top speed is 160 miles an hour? When was the last time you drove more than 80 miles an hour? What's the extra 80 miles an hour for? It's a story we tell ourselves. So we can deny that and insist that advertising and marketing don't work on us, and that nothing we do is going to survive, is going to win is going to be different in a double-blind study. But that doesn't make you human in 2024. Humans buy stories. No one goes clothes shopping naked. We already have clothes, so we're going clothes shopping for a reason. It's because we're buying a story, not because we're buying an outfit. Mm-hmm. And if the stories don't hurt anybody, then I think it's an extraordinary opportunity and a bargain. But if the stories hurt folks by dividing us, by denigrating people, by bringing shame to the equation, how dare you? Don't do that.
Right. You know, you talking about that brought me back to what you mentioned about the team building stuff. And I feel like some of the best people I've collaborated with were the people who were just as passionate about some of the things that I'm passionate about and some of the things that we've been working on. It made a lot of sense because people just hate to have another task. You know, it's just very boring to do the same. It's like going to the gym sometimes. So you just do the same thing all over again. You know what I mean? Can I get a new workout? Especially around this time of the year, everybody's into that. But it hits different when something is impacting the world. It hits different when it's something you align with. That's why I do what I do. You know what I mean? Even these conversations are just us having a chat at the dance table. We're just kicking it and having fun, you know? It's just a full circle moment for both of us. And if it could benefit anybody from listening to us and some of the stuff you're saying and some of the thoughts we're inter-exchanging, then the world is going to be a better place.
Exactly. Bit by bit.
Yeah. For people that haven't probably read one of your books before, and some of the work that you've done, I know that you've done a lot of remarkable work. And in one of the interviews that you did, I heard you say you've done like 10 great things in your time. Right, out of all, like, you've been around for a long time and you've worked on a lot of great stuff, but it blows my mind that you was summarized to 10 things. What would you say are some of those things outside of like email marketing?
I don't remember saying that, but I'll do my best to remind myself. The things I am most disappointed in are the things that I failed to do, the people I didn't give the benefit of the doubt to, the doors I didn't open for other people. The things I'm the most proud of aren't related to their commercial viability. Like email marketing is a $30 billion a year industry of which I own 0%. But I mention it because it's a big thing, but not because it's one of the things that when I look back, the journey of doing it was so generative. It tends to be a smaller, more personal kind of interaction, helping someone see who they are capable of becoming. I went to Kibera, which is a wonderful place, a large slum in Kenya. Millions of people live there. And I spent a day with 20 people at the Kibera Boys Club. And they had all read my book, Linchpin, and talking to them about how they were putting it to work. They had read the book more closely than even my editor had read the book. And it was just thrilling to see the reach of stuff like that. And so I've invented games and I've invented published books. I've helped nonprofits raise billions of dollars. I'm just so lucky. I won so many lotteries. And I don't think I'm unique. I don't think I have talents. I think I've decided to build up skills. And I'm willing to do things that don't work. Only if I think that process is going to help the situation. And too often we get stuck waiting for someone to tell us what to do, waiting for someone to pick us. And, you know, you and I were talking about what would happen if you set up a stand across the street from a farmer's market instead of in a farmer's market. Who knows, right? Is it going to help anybody? Is it going to cost too much? Give it a try. And so, yeah, if people want to see my work, it's at seths.blog. It's free, 9,000 blog posts. And maybe you want to read a book or so, whatever works for you.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. To close out, what is some advice you will give people that don't know where to start? I feel like nowadays you have so many resources, you know what I mean? From e-commerce sites like Shopify to Square to POS systems to AIs that could create content for you, you know what I mean? Where would people start nowadays? What would you say is like a good, safe bet for people to just hit the ground running with so many resources? Thinking back of your time and where people are at now.
So if you've ever spent any time with a 2-year-old, you know that they're called toddlers. And the reason they're called toddlers is because they toddle. They're not good at walking. But I have never met one that said, I'm terrible at this, I'm going to stop. They all get through it by toddling until they can walk, until they can run. It has never been cheaper to toddle. It has never been cheaper to figure out how to do something for 10 people, right? Start a shared spreadsheet at work where people can anonymously post their salaries so everyone can get a raise, right? What'll happen? Figure out where is there a service that, you know, maybe you can't get Dominican coffee where you live. So get in your car, drive to the Bronx, buy 20 pounds, bring it back and sell it to your friends, right? Maybe it'll work. And if you make enough money for gas to do that, you can do it again in 3 weeks. That is how we begin. Whether it's in person or online. There is no safe bet. There is no hit the ground running. There is just toddling. And simply begin. Simply begin.
I like that. That's literally what I did, step by step. I remember my first 50 pounds of coffee. I was upstate New York, and then I shipped it in one big box to my friend in New York City because we got all these pickup orders, but we had no place to pick up. So then we were like, we're just going to drop it off for free. Don't worry about it. And then my friend was going borough by borough on the train with this little tote bag, just dropping off the bags. It was such an experience. And people were make videos they delivered my coffee. And it was just us trying to get the thing out there, but bag by bag, we discovered more people. Then at the farmer's market, we've been blessed to build a community of people that support us, that believe in us, that want to see us win, and they want our product and our story to reach further than that. Exactly. So it's been a great experience. Yeah.
Well done. Keep doing it.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate you for joining us on the Don's Table.
Go make a ruckus, everybody.
Let's do it. Rocket ships.